Thank you all so much for joining us for the 15th Annual Honolulu Surf Film Festival. I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsors, Aquas and Hospitality. They've been a long-time sponsor. Gary Keeley at the Surf News Network for helping us spread the word about all of our screenings. I got a surf trivia question. And the prize is this, the Encyclopedia of Surfing hardcover, previously at the Duxbury Free Library. That's kind of cool. For anyone who can answer this following question, please raise your hand before answering and not shouting it out, so I can know who actually answers it. Okay, the question is, what is Randy Rarick's surfboard company called? Right there. Right there, yes.
There.
Yes!
I tried, Randy.
For those of you who didn't hear the answer, it is Bear. Also, please remember to vote. So up till tomorrow night is your last chance to vote for the Audience Choice Best Features and Best Shorts. If you like a film, just write its name and put a vote for it. These ballots are outside. And tonight's film is really all about that. It was shot in 16mm. I think it's beautiful. And we're so excited because, you know, I actually got this from Randy Rarick. He sent me this film and it's just wonderful, and we're so excited to include it in the festival. So now just to speak a little bit before we screen the film, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Randy Rarick.
You know, I always want to thank Sarah Fang because she took over as director of this about 5 years ago. And Jackie Walden started this like 15 years ago. And Eric, you know, who a lot of you guys know, made surfboards and still does. And so it's really neat after 15 years that the film festival is still going. And I've been coming year after year. And it was interesting because we were talking about the, you know, the Bud Brown library that Anna Trent Moore brings over and finishes off the festival every year. And it's 15 years we've been showing them. And in the early years, we'd always have a panel discussion that would be like George Downing and Joe Quigg and Kimo Hollinger and Ricky Gregg and Peter Cole, and none of them are with us anymore. They're all, you know, unfortunately gone to ride the big wave in the sky. So it's really important that we kind of perpetuate the culture and the history of what these surf movies are all about. And Anna's going to bring back Locked In, I think it is, on Sunday. So if you haven't already got a ticket, it's kind of a cool way to end the Surf Film Festival. And thanks to Sarah for keeping the stoke going. Good job, Sarah. So as Sarah said, it was kind of interesting. This guy in France decided to make a surf movie, and he wanted to kind of make it old school. So he decided to film it in 16mm, which is, man, that's expensive and a lot of work. And Romain Juchereau, which is, it's a French name, you know. So I just call him Romain, and we met. He got hold of John Wade, and John and I were surf buddies, and he got hold of John, and they communicated, and he says, oh, you know, I'd like to come to Hawaii to film a segment. I said, yeah, sure, come. And he had, you know, this vision of making like a classic old-style surf movie from the early 60s, and you're going to see it tonight. It really reflects that vibe and that feel, and he tried to capture it, but at the same time, you know, upgrade it to contemporary times. And so about a year or so ago, about a year and a half now, he came to the North Shore, and he hooked up with John, and then John and I hooked up with Roman, and then we got Jock, and then we got Kioki, and then we got Rosie, and we got Link Earl, and we did, and Todd Pinder, and we said, hey, you know, and he got so stoked. He goes, oh my God, this is, you know, the energy that we created. So what you're going to see tonight is the culmination of his efforts, and I think he did a really good job. I think you're really going to like it. And when we're done with the film tonight, if you can stick around, we're going to have a really quick little talk story of the people I just mentioned. And they're going to give their little input on what they did to make this film happen. And I think you're going to really enjoy it. It's kind of a throwback. As I said, it's, you know, some like it classic, and that's what it's all about. So enjoy the show.
What's today? I guess it's January.
Friday, January 6th.
Okay. It's Josh Martin here, and
M-U-N-O-Z, Mickey Munoz.
where did the term hot dogging come from?
Well, kind of my take on it is relating to real dogs. When the females are in heat, the male dogs are all hovering around, puffing up, and sort of advertising their goods. And I kind of get that hot dogging, was a way to put your friends on and show off, if you will. Kind of, that's how I related to, showing off, being a hot dog.
1967 Duke Kahanamoku Invitational Surfing Championship. Jock Sutherland, who was one of the original switch stance masters.
The purpose of switching stance for me at an early age was to be able to avoid getting hit by the wave coming from behind, because I couldn't see it because my back was to it.
Some like a classic. Without further ado, let me introduce our panel for the night. We have Todd Pinder, Rosie Jaffers, Kiyoki Saguibo, John Wade, Jock Sutherland, and of course our moderator, Randy Rarick. Please welcome them to the stage.
Come on, Pat. All right. So, I'd like to really thank you guys for sticking around. It's always kind of a pain after you watch a movie to have to listen to a bunch of talk, but I think, the people that are involved in this film was worth doing for. And it's really interesting because, as I said earlier in the evening, Romain was a French filmmaker who, kind of came out of the blue and got hold of John Wade, and anyway, the transformation came together, and when he came to Hawaii, we kind of hooked him up with all these people that were part of the film, and it was really fun. So I'm just going to run through really quickly and ask each of the participants a little question about their involvement working with Romain and filming the sequence. And I'd really like to start off with Rosie, because she's the woman of the crew here. So you saw Rosie, she was featured. Rosie, I worked together with her on a couple other projects, and when Roman said, he said, I want to get a couple local surfers, I said, well, we got, Rosie and Kiyoki would be great, and as you saw, they both became featured participants in this film, and Rosie worked with us on a project we did about 2 years ago with Nose Riders, and I said, she'd be really perfect. So John had the Hanson Super Light that I think was Mark's board, if I remember right. That was Mark's old board, and then they rode regular boards, and then of course the classics. But Rosie, how was it fun, working with the film here?
Well, we always score really good waves when we do these projects, and that helps because it's not like huge sunset or too small, and it's literally perfect 2 to 3. So that helped, because those boards are hard to ride. And the Hanson was not the hardest compared to the other project he's talking about, but I really liked how that board turned.
All right. It's really interesting because longboarding in particular, women surfers seem to really gravitate to longboards, and in my opinion, I think women are better suited to longboards than guys, especially nowadays with short boards and everything. And you get the chance to surf with a lot of other ladies, and what's your feeling on that, with women surfing on longboards versus shortboards?
I think that the women are just gorgeous to watch, but living on the North Shore and us having those bigger waves, I don't like to longboard in those big waves, and that's when I like to ride the smaller boards. So fortunately for us, we have those lots of diversity of waves, and so I think you want to ride what the wave calls for. And if the waves are big, I don't like to be and have that much board with me, so.
Versatile quiver, for sure. Ladies and gentlemen, Rosie Joffer.
Thank you.
So, since we're talking to Rosie, might as well go to Keoki. Keoki's Rosie's partner. And as you saw, Keoki worked with John on the Bobby Brown board, and Matt Chinosky from Australia happened to be in town, and Todd was able to film most of this. And Keoki, give us a little, riding that classic board from 1967, 68, I think it was made, versus what you're riding now, the difference between those boards from that far back to a contemporary longboard.
Well, riding, having the opportunity to ride that Bobby Brown, looking at the shape, John Wade, he's kind of telling me, the fin and all this stuff. It was different. You pick up the board, it was unique. It kind of it threw you out of your comfort zone, but at the same time, you really wanted to figure this unique, historic craft. That board, being older, I wasn't alive back then, but I definitely appreciate all the shapes and all that. Compared to nowadays boards, the modern boards today, I think with all the years of, growing and trying new shapes, it's always evolving. And I think modern day boards, you can do, boards are a lot looser. You can nose ride. I can't say easier. Nose ride's a really hard thing to do, but it makes it a lot, I guess, more malleable for the waves that you're surfing in, compared to having an older board like the California style boards, where it's they work great in the California waves and the softer waves, but when you bring those boards out to the North Shore, they turn to work differently. So what I'm trying to say is modern boards, they're great, they have all this evolution, but it's always great to go back to something back then, the 1960s, to really, I guess, have roots to where everything started. Riding those boards, it's, especially the older ones, it's a learning curve. And yeah, I love it. Well, as they say, you have to know where you've been to know where you're going. So you get a chance to ride these classic old boards because they'll make you appreciate what you're riding today. We saw that really neat clip that they did of Todd, and I'd never seen that before, and I was stunned at how good that was. I was whoa, this is one of those professional made films, and Matt, I want to commend you for a really good job on that. Matt Luttrell, good job on that one. But on that, Todd, obviously, you're a fantastic shaper. Everybody knows your boards are really, really good. Contemporary, at the same time, reflecting the classic we saw there with Joe Quigg in there. And, I don't really want you to talk so much about the surfboards because we know how good they are. But let's talk about, you helped film this actual film, and in doing so, you got a chance to watch Matt, you got a chance to watch Keoki, and you interacted with John on the designs and what have you. Talk about, taking that and then, putting it into film and what your, involvement in that was.
Yeah, well, obviously, most people know me for shaping, building surfboards, and people in the know that I'm more of a camera freak, as my Japanese friends call me. Basically, I've been shooting, collecting cameras and film for more than 20 years, and I just always kind of like the idea of a photographer's kind of perspective on things. You kind of look at things differently, and I had an opportunity to meet Romain. I was invited to France by Renaud, who was speaking in the movie as well. And I got to go shape in France and meet Romain, and we obviously hit it off very well and talked a lot about film and cameras and everything. So he asked me to film this part because he had come before to Hawaii to shoot a lot of the other stuff you saw, but when Matt Chinosky was coming, he wanted me to, you know, get Waikiki, obviously, you know, very iconic, and Surfing Queens. And Matt took right to that board like it was crazy, because that's not a very easy board to ride, that Bobby Brown. Yeah, so it was just great to, you know, be able to kind of put my passion out there that, you know, maybe a lot of people don't know about me, and it was super fun getting to use my little, you know, use my cameras and just do something that I've enjoyed a lot.
So does that mean we're going to have Some Like It Pinder Classic?
Yeah, I mean, I love what Romain did. Like, come on, like he just brought back like all those, you know, Bruce Brown, Bud Brown, you know, vibes. You know, it was really cool. And I mean, for me too, like there's so many guys in there that I've shaped boards for, so you know, that's pretty rad. You know, yeah, so you know, I have obviously a very deep connection with this movie. Just because of not just, you know, Romain, but like, you know, so many people I know involved, you know, so it's, yeah, I'm very stoked to just have a little part and have some of my footage in there on the big screen is obviously very rad.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Todd Pinder. So, you know, the idea, Todd really summed it up there, is Romain's idea was to take the early 60s vibe, film it in 16 millimeter and come up with a film that kind of projected that aspect but brought the modern into the thing. And probably crossing over the classic from the 60s and today, Jock Sutherland. Jock, you saw your model board that you had in there, and you know, interacting there with Roger Hines on the different shapes and that. When you were able to get together with Romain and film all of this, you know, what were you thinking versus, you know, the 60s to the contemporary?
It was a good crossover for me, having experienced the evolution in longboards as well as shortboards, but it's good to be able to ride a longboard, and even the old longboards, which has been explained here, are not that easy to ride. But if you figure out where to stand maybe slightly more on the tail, then it can turn easier. But for me, it was interesting to see, and I was very honored to be able to meet Bob Cooper when he was here in Hawaii about, what, like 15, 18 years, quite a while ago, right? Yeah, not 25, a long time, many moons, but I'm a big admirer of the Tom Morey, the Blue Machine concept, which is having a turn down rail on the nose, because that enables you to be able to trim up there, and it's as opposed to, say, the Donald Takayama, David Nuiva design for nose riding, which is to have a dished out nose, which is kind of, I don't want to be derogatory, but it's kind of like pushing, you're pushing water. It's not a drag, but I mean, there's a lot of people that can do the concave nose design and have it be more functional, more trimming, rather than, say, a board whose concave is more abrupt coming back into the rest of the board. But I like the Blue Machine design, and seeing that as opposed to some of the newer boards like Wingnut. Wingnut was very generous with me and gave me a couple of his Gray Ghost designs. They don't have much rocker at all. They can be hard to ride, but if you get them on the right wave, they can be a very good board for trimming and getting speed.
You know, so Jock's been around quite a while, and yeah, rode for Hobie, rode for Harbor, rode for Bing, then on the Brewers. So let's go back to the 60s. If you had to, you know, think about the different boards you rode and different manufacturers, if you were to pick one really good one that, you know, sort of stands out, which one would it be?
You're talking about a longer board.
In the 60s.
Yeah, okay. Yes, but in the late 60s, man, okay. let's take it at face value. Yeah. So probably the early pipeliner boards, which a lot of people would say, and I would agree, are kind of a takeoff on the Phil Edwards board, only made to be lighter and more maneuverable and to be ridden. It's kind of like one of the early longboards that you could ride at Pipeline with some degree of confidence compared to the old, much heavier, less streamlined boards. And so I would say it would be a toss-up, Randy, between the pipeliner boards and the trestle special.
All right, that's kind of what I wanted to hear. And then you made the transition to short boards. You were one of the guys from the 60s, you know, the Plastic Fantastic days. You shaped your own couple boards there. And prior to going into the Army, you were right on the cusp there as boards went short. What did you think of those early transition boards that you were able to finally get in the barrel of pipeline with?
Well, it was very much a revelation to be able to ride something smaller and lighter and faster, and so it made things a lot more enjoyable.
Well, that's the idea. All right, last man on the panel here, John Wade. John was the one that Roman got in touch with to try to make a connection for Hawaii, because he heard that John had a really big collection of classical boards. John has really been an aficionado of Phil Edwards, had a bunch of Phil Edwards Honolulus and a couple of Hobie Phil Edwards. And John, you know, it was interesting in the film. You can see driving an old classic car. You know, you're a former Hawaiian Airlines pilot and you know, vintage plane guy. How would you relate, you know, the vintage surfboards to that whole era?
I'll try to start out with a funny story. When my son was about 12 years old, he came to me and he said, "Hey, Dad, you know, I want to do." I said, "Keone, that's not good for you. You shouldn't do that." And he looks at me and goes, "Dad, I want to know anything about surfing, flying, or auto racing. I'm coming to you. Everything else I'm getting from Mom." Well, that's kind of the essence. You know, big history buff, and I love those three things. And I think the correlation here is that old surfboards are just like old cars and old airplanes. T-51 Mustang at an air show, or a classic 60s Formula One car at Goodwood Festival or something like that is a big eye catcher, and I think the surfboards are the same thing. And these guys did a great honor of bringing these boards alive. It's like seeing, well, Goodwood's a big car thing, and they've got all these old cars and they're old drivers, and it's a big deal. And these guys did the same thing for the surfboards. And then the other one, shout out to Randy. Obviously we're friends, but a lot of this happens because of him. The restoration progress. If he hadn't done all the auctions and the restoration, I'd have to wonder how far this movement really would have taken off.
Well, I'll just finish up the panel here and then we'll take a few questions. As John said, I basically, as you saw in the film, you know, devoted the last 50, 60 years of my life to working on classic old boards. I worked at Surfline Hawaii from the age of 14 and probably repaired, restored, refurbished 10,000 surfboards at least, if not more. And I've kind of come full circle since I retired from running the Triple Crown to going back to restoring all these old classic boards. And I really think it's important, as I said earlier, you have to know where you've been and know where you're going to see all these designs, and it's always continuing evolving. I kind of go like surfing evolves in an oval. It moves forward and then it loops back and picks up some of the history and the little designs and they get applied, and then it moves forward again, and it's never a circle. It's always continually moving forward in this oval, but we're not forgetting the past. And by applying that past to the modern day, it continues to promote and progress what contemporary surfing is, because if you know the past, you know how to apply that, you know how to move into the future. So with that, we'll take a couple questions from the crowd. Just raise your hand and you got a question for us.
Like, so maybe we've all had like a magic board, like after a session or two, you kind of feel like this is your favorite board you've ever ridden, like shortboard or longboard or whatever. And then when you want to get it made again, same measurements, same shaper and everything, and it just feels a little different. What do you think the main reason is? It like bad foam or bad juju? Or
have you ever seen two trees look exactly alike?
No.
Then the stringer is made of wood, and the grain is different, and the flex patterns are different. You know, and plus too, you know, maybe the sender had a bad day. There's so many variables. I mean, you know, in the end, it's handmade. You know, even if it's a computer cut, it's still handmade in the end. You know, like, I mean, there's different hands touching it too, right? The closest thing is maybe one guy doing everything, but still the basic, like we're still using late 50s technology, right? With the foam and the stringer, wood stringer, that's 1958, right? So until some kind of new foam or whatever we can use to like just a computer like cuts it out and it's done, then you could replicate your magic board all day long, right? You know.
But that's what they call them, custom surfboards.
Right.
So that's a really good point, because the hand-shaped board is basically a dying art. You know, shapers like Todd and myself and other guys that still hand-shape, you know, we're becoming dinosaurs, because nowadays, as Todd said, you can put it on a computer. You know, go to Costco, every one of those Jerry Lopez soft tops are exactly the same. So if you can get a really good custom, consider yourself lucky, because that magic board, don't sell it, keep it.
Admiring the surfing of Bobby Brown up there, a young Bobby Brown surf. What became of him? Does anybody know his fate?
I think John can answer.
Okay.
Bobby was early 60s surfer. He actually was the youngest finalist in the first world title at Manly Beach in Australia in 1964. Universally loved. Nicest guy imaginable. There used to be a midget camp and a Nat Young camp. Bobby was friends with both and respected by both. Everybody loved him. He was really progressive surfer. He was just getting ready to be, he had his own model. He was getting, Gordon Smith was funding his trip to Hawaii. He was going to get married. His honeymoon was going to be in Hawaii. And he was in a bar and some words were exchanged. It was a misunderstanding. A guy with a glass of beer in his hand punched him, slit his throat, and died. He was 21 years old, and he was waiting at the bar to meet his wife because they were going to go out and pick out stuff for his honeymoon. So,
In Australia?
yeah, that was all in Australia, in Sydney. So he was supposed to come to Australia, and had he come to Australia, it would have been Wayne Lynch, Nat Young, Midget Fairley, and Bobby Brown would have been the big four for sure. He was just really, really neat guy. And for some reason, you know, I never knew him, but for some, and he wasn't that big in the magazines, but his spirit resonates with a lot of people. I was one of them, and I was kind of on a mission. I used to fly to Australia a lot, and I wanted to get a Bobby Brown board. Gavin Scott, a good friend of mine, sourced one for me, and that was it.
So, John, do you think, you probably will agree that just in watching some of the pictures of Bobby here, that his style was maybe copied by both Midget and Nat?
Exactly.
I mean, smooth, you know, and maybe some Phil Edwards in there too.
Yeah,
so,
he had the hands up in the air.
Great
and
style.
the whole,
yes, but he was smooth, you know, he wasn't
really
flashy.
Smooth, yeah. He had his own unique take on the whole Australian, and Australia was huge. I mean, they're a big part of Hawaii and Australia is what moved.
And you probably agreed that if you watch any pictures of MP Michael Peterson, you could see
same thing.
Bobby Brown's influence in there.
Yeah.
Most of the very good Australian surfers back then were probably influenced by Bob.
It's actually Olympic time, and I'll make a little trivia thing. Duke Kahanamoku from Hawaii and Cecil Healy from Australia was the start of the bond between Australia and Hawaii in the first Olympics. You just have to research it and Google it, but it's a really interesting story.
Can you make a synopsis of that? That was a really good story.
Well, Duke missed his one of his semi-final races, I know it. And the Australian team said, well, if he can't race, he's the best. We don't want to race.
Yeah, Cecil Healy in particular said, you know, because he was one of the better Australian, he says, I'm not going to race. And so it went. Duke was maybe asleep, taking a nap or something.
Exactly. And that's when Duke Kahanamoku became so famous. And after that, he went to visit Cecil in Australia, brought surfing to Australia, although it was already kind of there, and it's a long story. But there's the beginning of the Hawaii-Australia connection right there.
And I predict this weekend an Australian will win in Tahiti.
There you go. I second that.
Any other questions?
John.
A couple more there.
You were night surfing Waimea. And
fabrication.
Oh, that was?
Well, I was out after dark.
Yeah.
Swimming in after getting caught inside.
There was no after dark surfing. I've surfed after dark, and there's been people like Brock Little who've been out, you know, when it was like 10 or 12 foot at Jocko's, I've been told, you know, full moon surfing, but not me. Safe stuff, you know, 3 or 4 feet. No, not one.
That's an urban myth.
Okay.
We'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I got one. Were you guys friends with Woody Brown at all? Does that ring any bell?
Yeah, Woody was around when my dad was here in the late 30s and 40s, and Woody was friends with George Downing, Wally Fawcett, Rustakaki, people like that. I knew him just incidentally from having lived on Maui when he was over there, so I wasn't, it was a very casual relationship. I knew the man enough to say hi and talk to him, but never enough to be. I don't think I ever surfed with him, but he was a very big influence on surfing as it is today. Yes.
When I had my shop in Kaka'ako back in the 70s, Woody came over and we worked on a board of his. He wanted to get a board, fix it up and improved on, and so he came into the shop, and that's when I got to know Woody. And I think I was probably maybe early 20s at that stage, and so just like Jock, we met and got to know him through a board thing, but he was definitely way generation ahead of ours, Two at least, yeah. Anybody else? All right. Well, we want to thank everybody for coming. As I said, this is a, something like a classic. The whole idea was just that. Hopefully you get that vibe from the early 60s, and we appreciate you coming. And Roman, I'm sure, will be stoked to know that this was the third biggest turnout for the film festival. And if you can, fill out one of the little forms and put it in the box before you leave. He'll be really stoked if he gets a couple of votes out of you folks. All right.